Gearheads know that some projects need so many parts, it feels like you need a whole storage unit just to store them. That's what eBay Motors' 122 million parts are for. Think of it as your virtual parts garage. They've always got the right fitment at the right prices. Use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Holidays are here, and so is fashionable fitness. Gift yourself a Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 5G, a phone that folds in half to literally stand on its own. Pair it with the Galaxy Watch 4 for ultimate wellness and wow factor. Check health stats, flex personal records. Over 90 activities can be tracked, like biking, swimming, golfing, and more. Invest in yourself with tech made to crush goals. Holidays open up with Galaxy. Shop it all at Samsung.com. 5G connection and availability may vary. Check with carrier. Products sold separately.
Hey everyone, this is the Almost World Podcast. Bringing to you mind-blowing interviews with guests from all over the world. So settle down, relax, and enjoy the show. Oh yeah, by the way, if you like the podcast, please support Elmo's World Podcast on Patreon. Your support is what helps the podcast improve more and more. 3. Welcome to Elmo's World Podcast. This is Elmo Ador, and I am here with my friend David Russell. Hey man, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, man, my name's David Russell. I'm a Christian apologist, and I host 2 shows. One is called Proselytize or Apostatize, and the other one is called Skeptics and Seekers. Check them both out. They're pretty fun shows. We do debates, interviews, and so on. Also, I'm a full-time student, and I own the Virginia Apologetics Union Facebook page over here in the United States. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm a family guy, and I love apologetics. So
awesome. Okay, bro. So, can you tell me, I guess, the background of how you became a Christian, right? Either you were raised or someone like you were converted. What happened?
Okay, so what happened was, my grandparents took me to church when I was young, so we had that background of Christianity. But when my mom married my stepfather, we just stopped going to church, and my grandfather got pretty sick, and yeah, so I mean, that ended my church going days, and I kind of grew up, believing in what I wanted to believe, and didn't have a really strong foundation, but I always had this this idea, this affection for Christ. And that kind of carried over, this affection I had for Jesus and stuff like that. And when I became 18, I gave my life to Christ. It was kind of a funny experience. It's not funny, it's sad too. But my great grandmother, she was dying from cancer at the time, and I remember just feeling real down because the whole family was down, and it was affecting everybody. And because she was just dying pretty slowly and painfully, and when you look at somebody that you think is like really good in life, they don't deserve something like that. So it got me thinking, and I poured out my heart to God one night and said, hey, if you want me to follow you, then you need to send 2 people or 2 angels. Like, and it's funny, I had this idea like Touched by an Angel, or Highway to Heaven, because that's kind of what I grew up around. Those are reruns my grandparents watched all the time, and I was like, send 2 angels to convert me, right? Or whenever you're ready for me to follow you, And it's kind of funny because it was not even a year, it was the summer after she had passed that my friend that was living with us at the time, he got saved. And he kept inviting me out, and I kept saying no. And finally I was like, okay, I'll go with you. And there are 2 people there. And, angel in Greek means messenger, it doesn't mean, something miraculous like I was saying before with the TV shows Touched by an Angel or Highway to Heaven. It's kind of funny. But, they could just be two people bringing the gospel, and that's who was there. Two people that brought the gospel and convinced me that, God would be with me and so on, and I converted there. But that didn't end my journey. That just began the journey, and I started going to a church that was Pentecostal and very charismatic, and it turned into what we call a word of faith movement, which is prosperity gospel and so on. And my walk was like a roller coaster. And, I didn't have much foundation and so forth. I mean, the only thing I think that brought me through those next 7 years were my relationship with Christ, the fact that I had a personal relationship with Christ. And one day I was just like, man, I can't do this. And then my dad passed away. And I went to his funeral, and my cousin, who's a staunch atheist, he sat down and he said, "Why should I have faith?" And throughout the conversation we launched into, I couldn't give him any good answers, man. And at the end of it, I was left even more destitute and searching, like, what did I give my life to for these past 7 years, man? And I was like, man, I really need to know why I believe this. And that launched me into apologetics, which I think God kind of led me into, because it started with me getting to understand how to read the Bible and so forth. And I started listening to programs, and I got into apologetics, and I've been doing that for 10 years now, 10 plus years now. Actually, I was able to go back to school because during the early years, I got an associate's in theology. And now I'm able to do this again and go back to school and go for my master's in philosophy and apologetics. So that's been really cool. It's been an interesting journey, and I'm really grateful and thankful for what God has led me into when it comes to apologetics, and that's where I'm at today, man. I'm hosting shows and getting interviewed and so on, man.
Well, I guess it's very interesting for me to note, though, that you're someone that actually admits that they had this spiritual experience, right? That most of the guests that I have had, they sort of just, say that they just believed, because if someone were to ask you how you would, I guess, falsify whether or not that, I guess, conversion was real or not, like you wouldn't really be able to give them an answer, and the only way you could give them an answer is just, well, to me it was so real, right? It was I really felt as if God had opened my heart and changed me and made me this new person, and that I became saved. But would you say the same thing?
In a way, yeah. There's so many different ways to describe a spiritual experience. I listened to your podcast with Joel too, and he had a little bit of an opposite story of mine even. But I would say that one of the things he said is like, and I would call it illumination, is a spiritual experience in a way. But also, I would say that I did have a conversion experience, and I think most Christians do, even if they don't want to admit it. But because especially in this day and age when people are looking for rational answers and just trying to use reasoning and stuff, I think that it's kind of hard for them to really go into that, because you really can't disprove it or prove it. So I mean, I don't use it in my apologetic until the end. And I'd say, hey, I have had a personal experience, and for me, that's real.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's just all there is to it, I guess, on that.
Yeah, I guess in what you just said, basically, you're not really going to use that argument in a debate, right? That, because I had this spiritual experience, therefore God exists. Because if you were to tell that to an atheist or another theist, then it would be really hard to convince them of the validity of that argument. But I guess if on a personal level, you could, it is, I guess for me it would be satisfactory, because we are all humans, and there are things that just act that are just that come to us, and we know for certain that they are real, even without any like external or rational justification. But when it comes to my personal spiritual experience, I guess I dive into it more as well, like philosophically, to try to explain it, I guess. But
Yeah. Well, we're both in that boat, my friend.
Okay, then I want to ask you the foundations of your Christianity first. So, when it comes to the atheist versus theist realm, right? We're mainly talking about God, right? The classical theist God. So, why do you believe in God, and why do you think it makes sense? It's not contradictory or problematic.
Well, yeah. So let's step it back just a few. I'm an accumulative case guy, So I think that there's several arguments that can lead to the Christian God, for example. And if we go back to the classical arguments, in a debate, I would probably use the classical arguments first, like establishing God exists, the argument from design, then morality, and so forth. So are you asking me specifically what is the strongest argument for me?
Yeah, I guess like why do you believe in God? If on a basic level.
Again, when it comes to the atheist and the Christian, I think that the argument from the resurrection is probably one of the greatest arguments, and the reliability of the scriptures. I think that you can make a really good historical case that pretty much blows any other historical case out of the water, especially from antiquity. And then I also think the cosmological argument is very compelling. So those would be the two that really stand out to me. But as an accumulative case apologist, I like to meet people where they're at. So I try to get familiar with a lot of the arguments. And it's funny because I have a learning disability in multi-step processes, which, if you know what a cumulative case is, it's multiple arguments. So I try to remember as much as I can, and I like to meet the person where they're at, and go from there. So sometimes I don't have any priority. I don't start with the classical arguments. Sometimes depends on where the person is, and usually that comes with trying to be in a relationship, and get to know the person and listen to them. I think that's a big deal, is listening to somebody. But as far as for me, again, the idea of the historical argument for the resurrection and the reliability of the scriptures and the cosmological would be convincing for me.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's sort of like you're starting from Christianity, and then that's why you believe in a creator or a designer.
Well, no, not really. When you're talking cumulative, it just means there's no priority of approach, right? So I don't have a priority in that. So I can start with the classical arguments and move into Christianity, which I normally do if I'm debating formally or sometimes informally. If I'm just meeting people out on the street, I try to meet them where they're at. So there's no priority there. So I don't reason from Christianity to God. Not all. There's sometimes, I think you can start with reasoning there, but it depends on where the person's at. You understand? Yeah. So that's kind of, it's where the person is. If they're already a theist, there's no point of me presenting classical arguments for God. I should jump into Christianity at that point, or stuff like that, or things that would lead us in action.
Yeah, but I guess what if in a case of just you alone in a room, right, and you're writing on this paper as to the reasons why you believe in God, without any other participants, how would you present your argument?
I would probably do it the classical theist way.
Okay.
And then so I would probably do it that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I guess like you believe, do you believe that the classical argument for God's existence is enough or is sufficient to prove that he actually exists?
I think they're enough to get you to theism. Absolutely. Yeah. And so did Anthony Flew. I mean, for years that guy was an atheist, and the argument from design convinced him. So I think definitely that they hold a lot of weight.
Okay, let's try to look at, let's say, one of the biggest arguments against theism, which is the problem of evil, right?
Ooh, all right.
Okay, let's say
You're diving in deep, bro. Right away.
Yeah, let's say I'm an atheist,
go,
right? Hey man, like God doesn't exist, because if he does exist, then he's an evil God because of starvation, of corruption, of rape, of the freaking concentration camps and Auschwitz and all of that. So if God did exist, then he's an evil God. If God is an evil God, then he's not God. He's just some alien with superpowers.
Alien with superpowers. All right, man. Well, I won't give you the whole argument. I can lay out the free will theodicy, which I cling to. I don't hold to a natural evil. So things like tsunamis hitting the coast and stuff like that, I wouldn't say is a natural evil. I know some people blow back on me about that, but I just think that's part of the teleology of this earth. If we didn't have this crazy nature that we see, we wouldn't have the life-sustaining planet that we all enjoy. So God has given us minds, and he's given us ways to combat certain forces of nature and overcome them, and that's kind of what he put us here for, to gain dominion over those things. So that would be one argument. The second argument would be, a lot of the things that you discuss, I would have to say, why do you consider those evil? Because on an atheist view, there is no such thing as evil. So if there is a God, there can't be an evil God, because evil doesn't exist to you. So we can go that route. I like to provide a theodicy, though. So I think that free will, the freedom of man, God created us with the real choices, and all those things that you described are things, is a humanity problem. Rapes, genocides, and so on, those are all human problem. And that's because we've got an answer. As Christians, we have an answer to that. And that is, we are all fallen in nature, and we've all sinned, and we're in rebellion to a holy God. So, and I know I sound like a reformed guy right there, but man has this freedom, and with freedom comes that potential to disobey, and we have, and it spiraled out of control since. So, I mean, if you're going to start blaming evil, if you're going to start, asking, for a theodicy or a reason that, or disbelief in God, I think it's kind of arrogant and premature to just pawn it off as an evil God when you don't even give the theology credence.
Okay, so I guess that basically what you're saying is that you can't use the problem of evil, because there is no such thing as evil or good in a godless universe, right? So you
Pretty
can't
much,
use that argument.
yeah. And any other suggestion otherwise is borrowing from our worldview, a theist worldview, because you can't have a real evil if there's no standard of good, So.
But I guess, like, for example, if there is such a thing as evil in a God inclusive universe, like for example in a Christian in a universe like that a Christian believes in, where God created everything, right? The fact that there is actually an evil would mean that evil sourced from God himself, right? Like, and why would there be anything like that if it's not coming from the ultimate source?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, is like, we have a theology that hasn't been given any credence, right? So our theology, we have to go into that at that point. I think it becomes a theological issue, because if you're going to admit that there's evil, right, you're going to have to at least consider the Christian theology, which does not put the source of evil on God. I mean, some people do. Yeah, some people think he ordained it. Personally, I don't think that. I think he created the potential for evil. And yeah, so I don't think there's things that like God does everything, such as God cannot sin, right? So, therefore God can't sin, right? So it's just kind of the whole idea of the theology that's being ignored here from the atheists, not from you, Elmo, is has to be taken into consideration, and it has to be examined, and you have to walk through it. And it can be a lengthy process. And if you're in a position where you can, talk to somebody like that and go into those deep theological discussions, then you should, because that's what we're called to do. We're called to give an answer. So that would be my answer on a nutshell for you.
Okay. So when we are talking about the classical arguments for God, right? It's more of just describing this entity that is omnibenevolent, omnipresent, omnipowerful, I guess, omnipotent. Yeah. So how do you start from that and go directly to Christianity? Because there are other options, right? Like Islam, Zoroastrianism, some sort of Hindu monotheist God.
So it's been so long since I studied the other major religions, so I won't be able to give them too much credence. But I can tell you from my investigations of them what I generally concluded. So I generally concluded that they had a lot of issues with either inconsistencies through historical inconsistencies.
Yeah, but let me stop you there, though, right? If you're gonna make a general investigation of other religions and make I guess a fatal conclusion. Let's say I took a look at Islam for a few minutes, and then I concluded that it's not the real one. So how do you know that you were actually right if you didn't actually dive deeper into it, right?
I dived deep when I did it.
Okay.
We had, I had to study other major religions. I mean, I still have my Quran on the bookshelf and several.
Well, let's
other,
talk about Islam
books
first, right? I
yeah.
think that's one of the biggest challengers to the pedestal of this monotheist God, right? So why is Islam not the right religion?
Why? Well, because I think they get their history wrong. I love the historical arguments for Christ. So when they say that Jesus didn't die on the cross, I'm going to have to be like, that takes me back for a minute, because the people that were eyewitnesses to his life, his death, his burial, and resurrection said that he did die on the cross, where Islam claims that he didn't 500 and some odd years later. So who am I going to believe? Am I going to believe in Elmo's best friend that gives me an account of his life, or I'm going to believe that in somebody that comes along and says something totally different 500 years later? That's just one argument right there. So I think that when you look at it historically, I think the credibility totally sides with the scriptural account from my studies.
I like that argument, but okay. But I guess I could actually do something different in reverse for that. If I were a Muslim, right, I would say, if you look at the God that Christians have, and in comparison to the Muslim God, right, the Muslim God is I guess it's really similar to what you would expect of a classical God, and if the Muslim concept of God is right, therefore the Quran's historical claims must be right as well. So it's more of starting their or basing their historical credibility on their proper theology, right, in comparison to what Christianity has.
Yeah, but I mean, why would theirs be any more rational than ours? I mean, we're both starting with a monotheistic God that, uh, you know, is the creator of time and reality, and then we've got this other aspect which comes into question, which is historical, and the evidence is heavily in favor of the Christian account. So, I mean, at least from my standpoint, I see that the Christian account is very historically reliable. It's passed the test over and over again. So, I mean, I would just come back with that. I mean, who's to say that theirs is more conforming to the classical image, right? I mean, if you look at anything from Thomas Aquinas on, I mean, there's very good arguments for the Christian God, then I think they far outweigh that. And I've seen the debates. I mean, I've seen people walk out on William Lane Craig that were Muslim because he was, I would say, just spanking them around, so intellectually. So, I mean, it comes to, reliability, and it comes to, questioning also those type of claims that you just made. So anyways, I'll let you go.
Yeah, okay, but other than the historical unreliability of Islam, what other arguments do you have against them?
Against Islam?
Yeah.
Man, I didn't even prepare for that. I don't have any right now.
Yeah, but I guess because you did say that you went deep into the religion, right?
Yeah, but that was a long time ago, but I don't have anything on that right now, man.
Okay.
You got when I told you to let me know so I could prepare, that if you said, "Hey, we're going to talk a lot about the religion of Islam," I would have looked into my notes that I have stored away.
Yeah, but yeah.
But go
I
ahead.
guess
Yeah, that's fine. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I think they make some pretty audacious scientific claims, such as ants talking and so forth. That's just one I remember off the top of my head that stuck out to me. But as far as the historical inconsistencies, I think that is the nail in the coffin. If you're going to make historical claims and they don't add up, then that's a problem. I don't buy any of the, the Quran has been only translated once. No, there's been several, variations. I think there's like 3 variations that they went through, and they burned 2 of them to for the one they have today. But yeah, I mean, I can make the same arguments about the reliability of the transmission of the New Testament, and that's what it comes down to. I mean, to me, I think the historical reliability, especially for me, plays a huge role into establishing truth. So, and I think we can get to the truth, and I think if we do enough investigation, we can see the truth. So that's just a general overview. Like I said, I wouldn't be able to give you true specifics unless I actually went back and looked into it again.
But I guess hearing what you said, it seems that you just at one point in your life you bookmark Islam as, okay, I've dived deep into this and X, right? This is not what the religion is. So after a few years, you've forgotten why. But at least you've bookmarked it because you did look into it genuinely, right? And actually,
absolutely.
Yeah,
and I did with the major religion. I mean, there's so many religions out there. I mean, you're not going to be able to study them all, and especially be able to study what you believe, right? So, you just give the best assessment you can. We're all human. We're not going to be able to we can't know everything, and I am fully aware of that. But yeah, I looked into the major religions when I was going through school, and I even studied further after that. But yeah, man, I came to the conclusion that Christianity was true. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I can say about it, man. Is of course I'm not going to remember everything. I mean,
let's dive deeper into why Christianity is true, right? So, initially, when we talk about Christianity, we have to discuss the Bible first, because that is the foundation, like the text itself, that is the basis. So, and how about like the Old Testament, right? Like, I want to know like your views on its historical and scientific claims. What is your position? That are you a literalist, or it's just allegory? Is that what you're?
Well, I'm a literature person. So if the literature dictates allegory, I'm going to go with that. If the literature dictates narrative, I'm going to go with that. So as far as if you want to get into the scientific claims, I'm sure you're probably thinking of Genesis, right? The creation account. So I'm an old Earth creationist, so I don't think it was literal 6 days. I think that it was So I'm an old Earther there. I think that it describes literal things that happened, and I think that it can be supplemented also with what happened, the chapters on creation in Job, such as Hugh Ross. I'm pretty much on par with Reasons to Believe's model, because it's got predictability and so forth. And so when it comes to Genesis, that's how I read it. When it comes to other scientific claims and stuff that the Old Testament gets into, I look at it in the genre that it's meant to be read in, and I try to do my best to exegete it that way. I also am blown away by its prophetic manuscripts, such as Isaiah, and then how it pretty much predicts the suffering servant and Jesus Christ. And to me, that those type of things, they hold incredible weight, and seeing that how a lot of these prophecies were fulfilled not only in the intertestament periods but also during the life of Christ is just, to me, gives credence to the Old Testament as a whole. And and it's awesome because you can also see the kingdom of God throughout. So I mean, I think there's a lot of typology there, but overall, I think you got to read the Old Testament the way it's meant to be written or to be read, and that is through the eyes of the people that wrote it, to the people they wrote it to.
Okay. Well, I guess like one real question did come on my mind when you mentioned that you were an old earther, and I can't let this pass, right? Like,
okay, go for it.
Was there a literal Adam and Eve, and did they actually name those animals, or the that temptation in the garden? Did that really occur? Like, was there really a snake? How do you view that?
Was there really
stuff?
a snake? Okay, so I do believe Adam and Eve were real people. I think that is also attested to by Christ and the New Testament authors. So I do believe that those real things happened. There is several interesting views on it, and I'm not quite settled on how the fall came about. My personal belief, and this is without being able to give it the entire study, is I take it for what it is. Humankind had a point where Satan had to have tempted them in a way to have them fall. Whether the snake is just a representation of him, or whether it's a real snake, and he's through the snake. I mean, we do have evidence of possessions and so forth, and demons going into pigs, and things like that. So I mean, my view allows room for the reality of those things happening. So I guess that's how I would approach it. So yes, I do affirm that Adam and Eve were real. So I do believe that there was a literal Adam and Eve. So I think that's the major one that we should investigate. So yeah.
Okay, fine. I guess that could be the case. But okay, I guess like if we're going to discuss the Old Testament, that I guess there are like the miracles like Noah's flood, or the division of the Red Sea and all that stuff. But if you believe in a creator, then it's really easy to believe all those other supernatural miracles. But one thing, right, like that should be that is the main focus of the Bible, is Jesus Christ himself, and his death and crucifixion and his resurrection. So what's your take on Christ being just a normal human being, just a teacher, and not really in his story being just made a legend by his followers? Like, would you believe?
Okay, so okay, no, I get what you're going. No, I think those are terrible arguments, for the simple fact is Christ didn't leave us. He didn't leave us with that, you know. We don't have that option. We don't have an option just to say he was a normal guy. The historical evidence suggests that he was something more. So yes, I do approach Christ with that idea in mind, because, you know, he was either, as Lewis says, he's either a liar, a lunatic, or he is who he claimed to be. He's Lord, you know. So people don't make the claims that Jesus made unless they are a liar, a lunatic, or who they say they are. So I have to look at I have to see what the evidence says historically, and I have to make my conclusions based off of what that, you know, where the evidence leads on that. And I think it heavily weighs in the factor that Christ was who he said he was, obviously, because I'm a Christian, right?
Yeah, I guess when it comes to, let's say, you know, like textual criticism, right? Like, how would you, you know, tell yourself, like, truly, like, for certain that the manuscripts actually portrayed or demonstrated that what actually happened in Jesus's life, and not, and because, you know, like, for example, the book of Luke, right? Luke actually just wrote what second witness testimonies, you know, and he is not really Luke wasn't really there at the time that Jesus was, you know, professing his gospel and stuff. So how do you know for certain that what was written in the gospel is actually what happened during Jesus's life?
Well, I mean, how do we know anything of history, right? So we have to investigate it. So what does the data show? I mean, we've got independent testimony. We have the discovery of Luke. So let's go into Luke. Luke is considered to be, by William Ramsey, a first-rate historian. So people have investigated what Luke has said, and Luke is pretty phenomenal. He's got a great style of Greek, very accurate in his details. You can also see his personality in the text, as far as like where he was from, such as there's a apparent, what they call an apparent contradiction in Mark and Luke, where a roof is described, right, into Peter's house when the paralytic's getting healed, right? So you have this, in Mark's account, he goes through the thatch. You know, it describes a roof that is common to Middle Eastern, Middle Eastern roofs at the time, right? So in Luke, you have the description that is kind of like a Roman style roof with plates, you know, clay plates, you know. So what's really cool there is that you get that little personality in there. To me, that lends credibility that Luke is just trying to give a true account of what he thought a roof looked like. So when you go also into Luke, you'll see that even down to things like what in Acts they say there's over, like, I think total over, maybe it's John, but I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a lot of historical things that have been proven and verified in the accounts of Acts and accounts of Luke, and you can actually go and investigate those and figure them out for yourself. I know one of them was the storm that supposedly wrecked Paul, his shipwreck. Is a common occurrence in the Mediterranean in this specific time of year, and Luke got that right. You know, so when all the pieces start falling in a row, it's kind of hard to deny the validity of what he said. And just to give you a quick correction, Luke is got his stuff not secondhand. He is a secondhand source, but he got his stuff from primary sources. which is considered very, very reliable, and a primary source such as Matthew or Peter and stuff, they're also primary people. So that's why things like Mark, who is also recording Peter's testimony traditionally, is a firsthand account, would be considered an eyewitness testimony. So these are the people that Luke investigated are primary sources, just like Mark took Peter's account. So once you see the similarities through the synoptic, and a lot of people say there's a synoptic problem. I don't really see a problem with synoptics at all. I think they're beautifully written. I think that you can go back and confirm a lot of what they say to be true. And yeah, so that's what I do, and that's what I love to do. I love to go back and I love to look at those things. The McGrews do a wonderful job at giving us undesigned coincidences in the Bible that they have studied through historical apologetics and so forth. And yeah, so I mean, there's so many different ways you can study this and come to the same conclusion. So, anyways, that's where I'll leave it.
Okay, so I guess like when it comes to Christ's resurrection, right? Like what you're saying is that I believe Christ died and was resurrected because the historical evidence says so, and I have no other reason to believe otherwise, right?
Well, I mean, I would take Habermas's minimal facts approach when it comes to that, right? So that would be, I'll just give you 5. Jesus' death by crucifixion is well attested by outside historical attestations as well. The disciples' belief that Jesus appeared, the conversion of the church persecutor Paul, the conversion of the skeptic James, and the empty tomb. I think there's several things you got to look to when you come to those conclusions. So as far as the historical evidence, I mean, if you're making a case for something, yeah, I'm going to think that the historical evidence has to be sound, it has to be solid, and it has to lead to a true conclusion, not just a false one or a one that leaves you with a great deal of probability that it didn't happen. Even though it could be a better reason to believe that it happened versus not happen, I think it goes beyond that. At least that's my opinion. I think it really sets the bar high for any other worldview to try to debunk.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about your show, right? Like, for what was it called again? The
Proselytize or Apostatize and Skeptics and Seekers.
So what kind of guests do you mainly have there? Is it religious discussions or philosophical?
We do all sorts, bud. Skeptics and Seekers, we do everything from religion to politics. We do everything from so same PRA. We get mainly in Proselytize or Apostatize, we get the religious crowd. We stick to either theology, philosophy, debates on atheism and stuff like that. But we cover a broad base, man. I would just say check it out, and we even do movie critiques and critiques of other YouTube videos. So.
Okay, so when it comes to your atheist guests, a lot of my atheist friends, they would say that they might consider the potentiality or possibility that there could be a God that exists, but it for them it's just not enough for them to actually believe in one, because the evidence is just not enough, for by their standards. So would you try to convince them otherwise, or like correct their criteria for a theist God? Like how do you I guess like discuss with them if you have an atheist in the conversation?
So like you all know, I'm a host, so I try to do is facilitate a fair environment that will facilitate a meaningful discussion. So I try to really give equal time. If the theist is hogging the mic, I'll let him know. I'd be like, hey man, let him respond, and I gotta moderate. But my goal is to create a welcoming environment for my atheist guests, and most of my guests like that. All of them actually like it. I've had, that's why the same group of atheists like to come on from time to time and discuss it. And I'm very appreciative for them because they bring another element to the conversation that we can actually dive into. And it's really awesome, and it gives you a lot to think about. So both I've dealt with atheists that are just mad at God. It seems, they don't believe him, yet they're mad at him. And there's no give. There's just no give in their thinking, So it's just like, you're dealing with week to week. You're dealing with people that are just angry at Christianity and all its failings even, and I can relate to that because I was failed by it at one point, where I didn't get that firm foundation and ask questions and get told that it's all because pastor says, and when he says something, it's Holy Spirit driven. It's biblical almost on that point. And then you come to the realization that that's not how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, is your approach like, for example, I have an atheist guest and he might have something to say, but no matter, at the end of the day, I'm still going to be a Christian, no matter how right he might seem. Okay,
so here's something that's interesting. Okay, so I've come to the point where I am convinced that Christianity is true. Of course, I'm not as arrogant to say that I know everything. Okay, so there are questions that raise in my mind that are, make me explore and doubt, So I just had one recently on the soul, and I've thought about it, and I still come to the conclusion, this is probably a good answer for it, But it was about, can we scientifically gauge when the metaphysical realm, the soul, interacts when it interfaces with the body? That's a good question, man. Would we be able to detect that at some point, right? Because you would think that we would be able to at some point when it actually interacts. So that's a question that I'm still exploring. I'm like, that's a good question. It comes to, this idea of, are we is there something to the substance dualism, and let's study that. Let's look into it, So, yeah, I'm not. I guess that's the best way I can answer that question. I think is that I'm convinced that Christianity is true because of all the research I've done, because of all the investigations I've done and study I've done, but I'm not fool enough to say that I know everything. And there could be stuff that, if you find the body of Christ, right, you find his actual body, and I'm using an extreme here, right, if you find his body, there is no Christianity. Even Paul says that, So, of course, I think Paul gives us that leeway to say, hey, God put us on this path of discovery. Humans are at their best when they're discovering things. And they're looking into things and they're exploring. And I think that's part of the way he made us. So I think that we have to keep that mindset. We have to keep the mindset of, I'm willing to learn, open. And I'm willing to listen to other people. I'm willing to hear their side of the story and then present what the answers that I have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I guess at the start, or even before you started your podcast, your YouTube channels, what came to your mind, or what inspired you to actually do this thing?
I think, especially in my area, I think there is a very, very big need, especially, like I said, in this area, for intellectual responses to Christianity. R.C. Sproul, the late R.C. Sproul, said that, I am troubled by the where intellectual Christianity is these days. People aren't diving into the intellectual side of our faith, and I think Apologetics does that. And I wanted to set a platform, not only just because I like Justin Briley and unbelievable. But I wanted to give people a platform. I wanted to start the discussion. I wanted to be able to equip some people and also to engage people. I wanted to engage. Like I said, a big part of it for me is about learning and listening. So, that's one big factor, but it also is to equip brothers and sisters that don't know much about their faith, that were in a position that I was in when I started this journey, which was, why did I believe what I believed? And asking that question. Coming to that point where I was like a deer in the headlights when my cousin, who's a genius level person, just asked me questions to, when I saw him again, having answers to those questions, I made him think. So, yeah, and not only that, but then there is that desire for truth that grips you and pulls you towards God in a closer relationship. And apologetics has brought me a lot closer to God as well, because I feel like I understand him better. I mean, of course, you can never fully understand an infinite being, but, or a timeless being. It's just, it brought me closer to him, I think. I feel a closeness to him more. And yeah, I'm getting into the RE stuff, but it's all right.
Okay, I guess well, when it comes to your spiritual life right now, bro, and I guess having this YouTube channel, sometimes it becomes jarring, right? It becomes this routine, and I've heard this before again and again, but well, does it affect your prayer life or your Bible reading, or does it actually become an inspiration for you? I need to study the Bible more. I need to grow stronger in my faith in order to be ready for all this stuff.
There's yes, I would say the latter, because I was just thinking about this today, and I was thinking about, if you asked me a question like this, how I would respond, because it comes up. And the fact is that the more I get into it, the more I find out I don't know, and I need to keep learning. So it inspires me to keep learning, because there's so much to it. I see some of the things that my friends discuss and some of the words they use, and I thought, man, I got a good grip on these Christian words and these philosophical words, right? And then next thing you know, they're speaking a whole different language, and I'm like, what in the world? And so I'm looking into these things now, and yeah, so you've gotta keep learning, you've got to keep moving forward, and you've got to learn. So
yeah, I guess, but. Mm-hmm. Well, on my podcast, right? Most of the things that I do, I just purely just I guess an interrogation or an interview. I just ask questions because I guess I initially my goal for this podcast was to be a reference for people to to understand the worldviews of people like you, right? Who to get down to the big questions and really ask them the hard questions in just a 1 hour interview, right? But I've been thinking though, when it comes to that, I would rather, I guess, prefer a more just of a discussion type of interview, because I guess when I keep just asking the same questions over and over again, it does become repetitive, right? For example, the questions I ask you, I've asked it to the same stuff to 50 other people, and well, I guess there are variations, but if we are all Christian, we're all going to say the same thing, right? And well, I guess that when it comes to my atheist guests too, when I give them the hard questions, and they sometimes it gets personal, so I would have to make it more of just a light kind of conversation. Don't you think?
Yeah.
But how do you do it on your YouTube channel? Yeah.
Okay, so in our platform, we have various kinds of discussions. I usually tell my guests, I say, hey man, this is really chill, really laid back. We discuss, we have conversations, right? Skeptics and Seekers is a different piece. I just started that, so I'm just going to refer to PRA right now, Proselytize or Apostatize. But as far as that goes, that's what I prompt my guests with, hey, we're going to do this. And then I usually bring the two sides together, and I say, hey, what's a good date? What's a good time? What format would you like? And I really promote that the discussion is theirs. It's their discussion. I make them the center point, right? I'm just a moderator. It's their discussion. So I want them to be able to give me input on how they would like it, how the conversation would go. And there are certain rules that we stick to, like the affirmation side always goes first, and the negation goes second. So what we do is usually we'll have opening statements. Sometimes we'll do a 5-minute rebuttal, or we'll just jump into open conversation where we just allow them and I'll moderate it. And I have gotten several responses saying, hey, thanks for that moderation. I was hogging the mic, or thanks for that moving it along because it was getting repetitive, right? So you got to pick up on that. You got to be able to pick up on, okay, we need to move the discussion along. So, and that usually comes in the form of like you said, asking questions or different questions, or even shifting gears in a way. But yeah, I mean that's kind of how we do things at PRA, and keep it flowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good thing, right? And I guess what's good about your YouTube channel is that you're grounded on this mission, right? To make a platform where the discussion is not going to be some dumpster fire or fighting, but it's actually something that's productive and a conversation that people would actually want to listen to. Right, and I think that's the most important thing, right? Actually giving something of value, not just to the two that want to fight each other, but actually to the people that want to listen, right? And they could actually learn from what these speakers are saying, because I guess that's the real point. You're making a mass media sort of channel, and you would want the audience to be the real center of attention, right? It's them
Absolutely.
that people you actually are serving, and not the ones who are debating.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, they're the ones we're serving, and the conversation that, like I said, is about my guests. I'm there to moderate them.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're absolutely right on that.
Okay, I guess like one question, man, because we're almost an hour now, and this is something that I would like to ask you, is that you're a Christian for since you were like 18, as you said, right? And
Yep.
if someone were to be really interested in studying all this stuff, and sometimes if I'm a Christian, right, and the other sides, or the Muslim or atheist or whatever, are actually convincing me to actually move away from Christianity, because of sometimes like there are the parts of Christianity that are hard to accept, or some and what would be my attitude towards this? Should I be more of a like fideistic? Oh, I'm just gonna ignore every logical thing and that comes about because I am going to stand on my faith on Christianity, or should I be more of like, they might be presenting a more logical argument, but I'll just have to keep studying Christianity in order to arrive at a better argument than theirs? Like, how do I stay a Christian if I'm going to indulge in these discussions?
Well, for me, but when it comes down to it, you need to look into where the evidence takes you. Okay, I don't promote people having a blind faith. So I wouldn't say that you just ignore these deep questions, because we're commanded as Christians to have an answer for any man that asks for the hope that lies within us, 1 Peter 3. So I would definitely say that you need to look into it. And how do you keep your Christianity from that is true. There are good, I would say, just from my personal experiences, I haven't gotten to a point where I think that, Christianity's false because of the arguments they present. I see the arguments they present, and I think the Christian has the better argument when it comes down to it. Now, there are things that are going to make you, shake. There are things that are going to make you tremble. There's going to be arguments that send your mind through a loop. But at the end of the day, look into them, study them out, and come to your conclusion that way. Honestly.
Awesome. Well, hey, David, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a great time. You're awesome, dude. And
thanks, bud.
Subscribe to his channel, guys. I just search it on YouTube.
Yeah. Yes,
Awesome.
it's fun.
Okay. So that's the end of it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is your host, Elmo Ador Jr. And thank you for listening in. And please subscribe. Please follow us on Facebook. Please follow this. Please. Thanks.
It takes a lot of ingredients to fix or build a car, like cooking, but without the frozen dinner easy way out. eBay Motors has 122 million parts. It's always the right fitment, so you can follow any recipe to a T. Whether it's a vintage Italian coupe that's classic like Grandma's meatballs, or a German luxury car that's as complicated as Oma's rouladen, to cook up something great in the garage, use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Holidays are here, and so is fashionable fitness. Gift yourself a Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 5G, a phone that folds in half to literally stand on its own. Pair it with the Galaxy Watch 4 for ultimate wellness and wow factor. Check health stats, flex personal records. Over 90 activities can be tracked, like biking, swimming, golfing, and more. Invest in yourself with tech made to crush goals. Holidays open up with Galaxy. Shop it all at Samsung.com. 5G connection and availability may vary. Check with carrier. Products sold separately.